So the election night was definitely interesting. I would say that from my kind of expectations and gut feeling going into it, I did think that Trump had an edge. I felt that Harris done had not sufficiently convinced people that she was going to be superior to Biden. And I just don't think that there was a successful convincing of people to show up the way that there was in 2020. So I think going through that, I was kind of expecting a Trump victory, or at least it to be. I figured it would be a Trump victory, but close, or maybe just like borderline in general. I was not quite expecting Trump to. Actually, honestly, Trump pretty much performed as I was expecting. What really surprised me was how much Kamala underperformed, because I was really expecting Kamala to get, you know, a decently larger number of votes in general, similar to how like Biden had a lot of votes in 2020, whereas the Republicans had gotten a fair number of votes, but they didn't get like the numbers for both sides were down from 2020, if I recall correctly. I mean, actually, Republicans I think was slightly up, but the Democrats was way down. So I was expecting there to be closer numbers from the Democrats to what their 2020 was, or maybe even slightly lower, but not like 20 million, which is what I think it approximately ended up being, which is massive. So I think that Kamala just didn't successfully convince the American public that this was that she was the one they needed. And I don't know if this was necessarily an instance of Trump convincing a significant number more people to vote for him, because honestly, as his numbers didn't move nearly as much higher. I think that this was more of a case of Kamala unsuccessfully convincing people to vote for her, and a lot of her voters choosing not to vote, period, or voting third party and alternatively. And I think that was really what kind of crushed the Democrats kind of thing there. I guess I'm kind of getting into the second part, aren't I, a little bit, but but yeah. So I was my reaction was one of like, this is how I expected it to go, but not to this extent. I was expecting a Trump victory, but I thought that like we'd have multiple states where it was like, 10,000 votes here and there would sway it one way or another. But Trump won pretty convincingly in almost every single swing state that he won, which I guess he won all of them. So like there wasn't really a swing state where it was really close to like the same way it was in 2020. Whereas, I was expecting it to be a lot closer. So I think it really comes down to just Kamala's underperforming was really surprising to me rather than Trump's performance. I thought that he pretty much performed about as well as I was expecting. But then in the terms of electoral college, Kamala's underperformance ensured that Trump was getting a lot of value from all of his votes, that he got higher than in all those places. So I was it was definitely a interesting election, because as Andy was kind of alluding to, like the media was very much pushing that this was going to be a really close race, but then there were other sources that were very pro Trump. And I was going into this election, I think the main thing I felt was that there was a lot of people who were confident that Trump was going to win, and there was basically no one I talked to who was confident that Kamala was going to win. And I think that was a big indicator of how the people were feeling going into this election. Was like, I asked a whole bunch of my friends, family, etc., that what their gut feeling for the election was going into it. And it was overwhelmingly that Trump was going to win the election. There was basically very few Kamala is likely to win kind of where Kamala is the gut feeling is that Kamala is going to win. It was very much like people were very expecting, like they just had this feeling that Trump was going to win. And I feel like you can't quite place your finger on it sometimes with that gut feeling, but that gut feeling is oftentimes a fairly accurate indicator. So I think it was definitely not that surprising that Trump won, but also, yeah, there was definitely the results I think were a little bit surprising for me, but it was more so in the underperformance rather than like anything else. So that was kind of my main takeaways.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Thanks for saying that. And yeah, just to maybe fact check you a little bit, uh, I think the California vote is only about 60% in at this point. So it's like the reason why Kamala's total votes for her is like it seems like it's really low, despite the population has grown a lot. I think that might be a contributing factor that she might still get a few million more votes in her favor by the end of all of this. So that's the reason. But California is so left leaning that you can call those votes for Kamala already. Like they've declared the state like winner already. But it's just they haven't counted the votes, so it matters for the popular vote. But even despite that, though, Trump will still win the popular vote by all projections, like the 99% certainty that Trump will still win the popular vote even after they finish counting the California votes.
That's fair enough. I hadn't seen the more updated numbers. I hadn't realized that they were still counting votes in California. So yeah, I stand corrected on that one. So maybe Kamala did get a similar number of votes, but they just weren't where they needed to be.
Yeah, no, even after they count the California votes, it's pretty clear that she'll still have underperformed the Biden's 2020 performance by significant margins, no matter if you count the total number of votes or just her performance in certain bellwether counties, they called them, or just in swing states in general, right? So what you said about her underperformance is still true. So I don't think there's any debate on that. There's no way you can slice it. And I guess with that note, we can maybe move on to the second part of the story to discuss more in detail why she underperformed and whether it was more of a Harris loss or a Trump victory. I know it's both, but is it more one than the other, right? That's the question that we're going to try to answer in this segment. So I will start this segment with a post from a man named Nick Carter. So if you don't know who he is, he's a famous person in the Bitcoin crypto industry. He was one of the main people that were advocating for Bitcoin mining and how it could be a good thing for the environment when everyone was saying back in the day, before a lot of people understood Bitcoin, and a lot of people still don't understand Bitcoin, and they still make the energy argument, but a lot more people back then were making the argument that Bitcoin is bad for the environment, blah, blah, blah. And Nick Carter was the one that was like really famous for pushing back on that. And yeah, he's a really smart dude, and I really respect and agree with what he said here, which is that more than anything, I just feel relieved that reality has finally been imposed on the establishment left. You cannot manufacture enthusiasm using the mainstream media alone. You can't gaslight people into having the establishment run as the change candidate. You can't run a campaign without taking unscripted interviews. You can't install a candidate without a primary and claim to be the party of democracy. You can't run a campaign without specifying policy positions. You can't be the most leftist senator and claim to be a moderate. These contradictions, in the end, were too great, and the arrogance was simply unbelievable. People saw through the facade. Thank God. So That's what Carter had to say, and I totally agree with him on everything he just said there.